Hello, welcome to Focus on Fantasy Romance, episode number 48, a podcast where we discuss books, industry, genre, and our geeky lives. I'm your host, Elle Klaus.
I'm A.R.D. Clerk.
I'm Paulina Woods.
And Ishabelle is waving. So we have a mixer topic today, so we're going to start with news, as we do at the first week of the month. News is slow for me. Anthology is going through proofreading. Deceiving the Bandit Lord is with beta readers, and I am going to be going back to college starting the 1st of November to finish my business management degree. And I'm doing that because I'm sick of getting passed over for promotions, and my work will pay for it. So kind of no-brainer now. Amy, what's your news?
I have no news. It's been a really shitty past couple of months for me. I was pushing through trying to finish a novel, knew that it wasn't right, and I was still trying to do it anyway, which was very bad. And so what I eventually did was trash the whole thing and start all over again. So from 40,000 words to 0. So I'm right back at about 5,000 words now, but a much better voice and style to finish out the series. So the anthology is in proofreading, and basically that's about it. I'm hoping maybe I'll have a holiday short story out this year. And that's all my news. P, what's your news?
I have 2 books coming out in November. They're both in anthologies. One is following my Witch's Amulet story, and the other one is a brand new kind of feel that I'm going for. It's like Genie and a Shifter. So those 2 books coming out. I just started book 4 of my Witch's Amulet, Mate's Guardian, which is a mermaid, so my mind's all mermaid right now. And what else? Oh, I moved my room around, took all my books off the bookshelves. Now I have 2 bookshelves. Each of them are like 2 stacks deep. Yay! I need to get another bookshelf because it will look pretty. Yeah, that's about it. I'm good. And I believe Ish doesn't have anything. Right, Ish? Yes. So, Elle, back to you.
Okay, so today's topic is inspiration, and I thought we'd break it down into little subcategories, and we'd start with how we got started writing, like what originally inspired us to write. So what inspired me to write was actually an assignment that I was given. I think it was in 4th or 5th grade. It was write a short story about something, and I don't remember what the story was about specifically, just that it was in a jungle and it had a boy and a girl that were in some type of relationship, and that was how it all started for me, and that was how I knew I wanted to do this whole crazy writing thing. So yeah, like a lot of authors, it bit me young. So what was the thing that originally inspired you to write, Amy?
I think what inspired me to write was basically the fact that my mother is a huge bookworm. She's pretty much obsessed with true crime and the Civil War and World War II. So not only did she read nonfiction and always had a lot of nonfiction books, but she was also reading fiction at the time. And she would take us to the library with her. So I got my first library card when I was about 4 years old. As soon as you can write your name, which my name's only 3 letters, as soon as you could write your name, you could get a library card. So she would take us to the library, and that was like, we lived literally in the middle of nowhere. The library was like, a giant thing for us to get to go. So she would take us to the library and let us pick out 2 books, and then, we would learn to read those. So I think that's kind of where my obsession with words started, and I have a really good memory. So I was able to memorize books. So people thought I was reading, but I really wasn't. I had just memorized what other people read to me. And that made me feel like really awesome because people were like, oh my God, you're 4 years old and you can read a book, which I really wasn't reading it. I was just reciting it. But so then my mom would give us pencils and paper and say, you know, write your own stories. And so then we would, and then we would read them to each other. We would play school all the time, and we would always give each other assignments because I have a large family, lots of brothers and sisters. So we give each other assignments, you know, write a story about X or O or whatever. So I think that's really where it kind of began with me, is I always wanted to see if I could outdo my brothers and sisters and write the best story or the most exciting story or the scariest story or whatever. So I kind of just took it from there. And then, you know, like every teenage girl, I wrote poetry and songs, did plays in high school. And then, you know, as time went on, it progressed to novels and short stories and that kind of thing. So I think that's where it started with for me, is with my mom. P, what about you?
So my I'm laughing because I'm thinking my nickname growing up was called Mama. And it wasn't because I was nurturing or nice or whatever. It's because I was bossy as fuck. And my earliest memory, honestly, I tell my mom things, and she's like, "Dude, you were only 3 years old, or you were only 2 when that happened." But I seriously remember in preschool is when my storytelling started. I had a bully in preschool. He was mean, and his name was James. And I know his last name now is James Hanna, but at the time I didn't. His name was James. And he bullied me all the time. He would push me. He would do all kinds of things. And one day, I can tell you, I was supposed to push the girl. She had laryngitis. Her liver was shutting down, so she was yellow. But we all got to push her in a wheelchair. And one day, it was my turn, and he pushed me down and pushed the wheelchair, and I was mad. I went home, looked at my older brother, and I said, "I hate James." And he's all, "Who's James?" And I swear to God, I looked at my brother and said, "My arch enemy." At that moment, I created a whole world that my family still plays in. And I think that's where my storytelling came from, is at 3, like literally, even my mom, she still talks about it. She was like 3 years old. I created such a strong world that as my siblings were born, as my younger sister, younger brother were born, they were pulled into the world. And they can literally recite to you who James is, Jamestown, how it's run, who's the mayor, what it looks like. I built this world. And in our backyard as kids, we had streets, a red wagon, we had storefronts, we had a battleground. And all of this stemmed from one little boy being a bully when I was 3 years old. And after a while, my siblings kind of grew up, and I was still trying to boss them around in my little world. My mom gave me a diary, and she's like, "Here, write in this." And she still has those diaries. And it's really interesting to just see how I was a writer since I was 3 years old. I created worlds that were very intricate. Even like my mom, we had currency. My mom was like, "Are you kidding me?" Like, we had money, and we would trade for like snacks to go to school. And like this, it's weird. And my brother's 8 years younger than me, 8 years younger than me. And he can literally tell you about Jamestown, how it's run, where it started, how it started. That's how bad it is. So I think my love of writing, I was born with it, honestly. I'm one of those rare people, I guess, that was just born with it, and I had a trigger and it popped out. And it was really cool. So that's where my love of writing came from. And if you ever want to know about Jamestown, I'm thinking of actually writing a story on it because it's funny. But it's your turn.
Well, I didn't actually develop a love for writing until I was an older kid. In my teenagers, I wasn't born with it. I was an avid reader from a very young age. I used to live at the library, but I actually didn't start writing until I got punched in the face. Ishabelle wasn't always a good girl. When I was younger, I was sent to an alternative school for, stupidity now, I realize, of course. And while there, I got into a fight with a boy in the middle of class. His name was Steve. Just leave it at that. And it resulted in me getting punched in the face because I wasn't fast enough to move. And, well, our punishment was we had to write a 500-word essay, which really sucks when you don't feel you were in the wrong. But anyway, I wrote the essay, you know, I did my apologetic bullshit, patience is a virtue, blah, 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 and turned it in after my suspension. I had like a 3-day suspension, I think, with it too. Turned it in, and all the ladies in the office were like, this is really good. Oh my God. Do you like to write? And I'm like, no. But I read a lot. So it just kind of sat with me for a long time, the praise I got. They actually hung up my disciplinary, you know, essay on the bulletin board in the office. So everybody knew I was in trouble. But I wrote a really good essay. So I really didn't think about it. I just continued to read my books and that. And then one day I came across a book and it really pissed me off the way it ended. I was like, that's not how it should have ended. I could write this better. So then I was actually about 15, 16. I was late to the game for writing for, you know, compared to you guys 3 and 4. But I got out my mom's old beat up typewriter, you know, I'm pecking away at the keys, and never did finish a story though. I always tried, and I was just like, you know what, screw this. I'm gonna go back to reading. But it sat with me all these years that one day I'm going to be a writer. I didn't know when. I didn't really know how or what I was gonna write at that point. But it like I said, it just stuck with me that I have a talent for writing. And then when I returned to college in my 20s, I had to write, it was actually my first essay. I think it was on the Greek gods or something, the first class I took. And the teacher, she's like, have you considered professional writing? And her feedback? And I'm like, and that's when I wrote To Wish Upon a Roman. So from there, it just kind of took off.
Yeah, I think I wasn't 2 or 3. 5th grade is what, 12? I have no idea. But yeah, whenever the bug hits you, you just gotta kind of roll with it. So to kind of segue, being necessarily mean that we're going to pursue publication. However, everyone here has pursued publication. So I want to know what it was that inspired you to pursue that publication. I didn't get published, or I didn't start seriously seeking publication until like 2014, although I had been writing in NaNoWriMo since 2004. So the first time I won NaNoWriMo, which means I just hit 50,000 words on a story, was 2006. And I think I've won NaNoWriMo like 6 times. So I keep hearing this phrase that you have to write 1 million words before you get really good at writing. I think I've managed to do that just because I've done NaNoWriMo so much. But so I had all these stories, and I was like, you know what? I don't want all this effort to be for nothing, and I don't want my audience to be limited to my immediate family. So I'm like, that it's good, so I'm going to try to find a publisher. So that's when I got on query.net or querytracker.net, and I started looking for publishers that would accept my fantasy novel, which I was really in denial about this genre. Like, this isn't a romance novel, it's a fantasy novel. It's got werewolves and elves. But I was really in denial. But so I ended up getting picked up after 6 submissions with my current publisher. So I had just gotten, just sick of, I didn't want to, all this effort, and I didn't want anything to show for it. Plus, everyone knew that I was writing, and they're like, so when are you going to get published? Because apparently that's the epitome of accomplishment if you put words to paper is publication. So that's what lit a fire under my rear end to get published. Amy, can you feel the question? You're kind of jostling around.
Sorry, my phone was acting really stupid for a second. I can field the question, sorry. So what inspired me to get published? Is that the question? What inspired me to get published? Basically, again, thank you very much to my lovely mother. She So I wrote this story, which actually was the beginning of my novel Between, which is the first one I read published. And I started putting it on Facebook as just little snippets, like in the notes, and I would do like 2 or 3 chapters at a time. And so my mom was like hounding me every single week to write more and to put more up on Facebook because she wanted to know what happened. So I told her, just let me finish it and then you can have the whole thing. So I did that and I stopped putting up on Facebook and actually finished it. And then I sent her the whole thing. And in the meantime, while she was reading it, I got a wild hair up my butt to start writing a science fiction romance novel. And it was the most awful, I can't even tell you. It's still in a drawer. There's actually 3 of them. They're like 125,000 words each. Ridiculously long, completely complicated, over just beyond, like insta-love, insta-lust, like all the things that you can imagine that are wrong with a newbie writer. Like I did them all, every single one of them, all together in one manuscript. So as bad as it was. But I was sitting my butt down in a chair every night at my computer and I was writing. So my mom got back to me and she said, I really think you have something here with this angel novel. I really want you to see what you can do with it. She's like, I really think you should try to get it published. And I'm like, oh, publish schmublish. I don't have time for that. I'm working a full-time job. I have 2 kids. So I let it sit for like a year and a half every night just for something to do. And then started thinking more about publishing, and it was like this little earworm that was like burrowing its way into my brain. And so then I started submitting. So of course the first 2 places that I submitted to were like big 5 publishers, and you get back your rejection letter, your form letter that's been photocopied 9 million times, so it's barely readable. And you're like, oh.
That's what I got from Tor.
Yeah, Bane. So it was, yeah. So I'm like, oh. So I started feeling a little dejected. Then I got a very nice letter from a small publisher. They gave me some really good feedback. They're like, we really like your story. I used a lot, oh my God, a lot of dialogue tags. Like literally, he said, she said, he chuckled, she chuckled, he nodded, she nodded. Every sentence was awful dialogue tags. So they gave me some pointers. I started reading, studying the craft of writing, all these things, listening to podcasts, watching webinars, blah, blah, blah. Tightened up the manuscript and then started submitting again. And then I got an acceptance letter from my current publisher, which is Nevermore Press. And that was the story of Between. And it went out and so far, pretty well received and everybody liked it. And then while all that time that I was doing all those things, I was writing and I had a huge backlog of stories already written. I had Forged in Fire. I had Bound to You. I had the beginning of The Alchemist's Kiss already laid out. So I was able to bam, 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 release stories like one after the other because I'd already had those backlogged and ready to go. So that's kind of how I guess I got inspired to publish, as my mom wouldn't leave me alone. And she kept bugging me until I tried it, at least. So, P, how did you get involved in publishing? This is a story I haven't heard before, so.
I actually got to publishing from blogging. I started as a blogger in 2012, because my older brother kept saying, you have a story to tell. I was like, I don't want to write it. He goes, well, in that case, do a blog. Like, all right. So I started a blog. My first ever author to hit my blog was Amy Boley. And she's like, well, I'll give you a book to review. And I was like, okay. After her came Valerie Tumblery, and then Renee Mason. And it was Renee one day, I wrote like 3 reviews and she literally goes, why aren't you writing? I was like, what do you mean? She goes, these reviews read, she goes, you have way too creative a mind to stay a blogger. I'm like, well, I write, but I never published. And she's like, why? I don't know. And she's like, you need to publish. I was like, well, it's not something, just publish one book and see what happens. About a week after that, that's when I started Stone Guardian, even though I called it Kissed of Stone or something stupid. And it was a really dumb title. I was like, oh God, this is dumb. And so I wrote it and I set it aside. I'm never going to let anybody read this. My best friend was like, Paulina, send it to me. She sent it back and it looked like my third grade teacher took a red pen and just hit everything in there. And I went back, I corrected it, sent it, and that's basically how I started it. And it's only because, honestly, people pushed me. I would have stayed a happy blogger if people hadn't pushed me. And I have so many, I have so many books, just half written, because I used to just write for fun, that I have goobers of books. I have a thing in my closet, a plastic tote thingy, and it's full of just papers. And it's papers from when I used to just write things. And so sooner or later, I'll publish half of it. But that's how I got into publishing, because there was basically one author believed in me. Renee believed in me, and she said, hey, do it. And she kept pushing. And she still pushes. And I'm published now, and I really, I honestly, sometimes I can email her anytime, and she answers. And when I get to a point where I'm like, I don't want to write anymore, she's like, why? She's like, you're doing great. You're doing great. She goes, look how many books you have published. So my publishing started because one author believed in me and pushed me. Ishabelle.
Let's see. Why did I choose to publish? Truthfully, I wanted the validation that I was a good writer, a decent writer, and I thought I would be rich. That second part didn't pan out very well for me so far. But hey, I got the validation, so halfway there. But that's really all it was. And now I'm just addicted to publishing and telling my stories. But originally it was, the validation and the, buy me a yacht. So take it from there.
I think a lot of people have the misconception that once you become a published author, you're going to be able to quit your day job and have a summer home in Scotland. And yeah, we can all attest that is not how that happens. J.K. Rowling is like the 0.01% or something. And honestly, I didn't hear about Harry Potter until she was in her 4th book, I think it was, whenever they were burning the books. And I always make the joke that I just need to write a book that's so good that people will burn it, and then I'll be famous because everyone will buy my book to burn it. Maybe not necessarily the right motivation.
That's right. You have to get on the ban list before you become popular.
Yeah, just write a banned book, and then you got it made because everyone's gonna buy it so they can burn it. Not thinking that you still get paid for the book.
Stepfather Uncle. I'm gonna write a Stepfather Uncle.
Is it gonna be a romance?
Who cares? It's gonna be banned.
Oh, okay. So on the topic of inspiration, we can talk about what actually inspires our stories. A lot of mine stems from dreams that I have. So my dreams are either off the wall, batshit crazy, or an entire romance novel with subplots. I kid you not. It's like, I always joke that it's color and surround sound dreams, or just garbage. So you can always tell when I'm getting enough sleep because I'm getting a lot of story ideas, because I don't dream when I'm not getting a lot of sleep. So I have a binder around here somewhere, one of those big 4-inch binders that just says story ideas. And what'll happen is I'll wake up, I'll remember my dream, I'll write it down, and then I've got the story idea. So my anthology idea, the Love Through Heartache, that was a dream that I had probably 10, 15 years ago. And it's evolved during the course of me writing it, but the base story was a dream that I had. Stealing the Wolf Prince, that was a dream that I had. There was some parts of the story that didn't necessarily work, so I did some brainstorming and made things work. But the whole, like, the scene, if you've read the book, the scene where Kira's in the dungeon and she's chained to the ground being sacrificed to the wolf, that was the dream that I had. And it was so vivid to me that I could feel the breath on my neck. It was like the hairs on my neck were raising when I woke up. So I knew that I had a good idea with that one. And sometimes I get inspiration from things that I'm reading, movies that I watch, music that I listen to, an offhand comment that someone has said. So I've had ideas that are just like a fraction of a full concept. Those I save, because 9 times out of 10, if I have a gap in like a full story concept, I can just grab one of these random ideas that I had and it fits like puzzle pieces. It's really weird. I know if I push it too hard, everything will just like not work and fall apart. But if I'm like, okay, story isn't working, let me not think about it and go do something else, something will come up that's a perfect fit that solves the problem, and Bob's your uncle, there it is. So that's kind of how my inspiration works, is dreams and then random inspiration that miraculously fits into all the holes that the dream didn't answer for me. So Amy, where do you get your story ideas? What inspires you for your stories?
So story ideas can be from random things, like signs at the grocery store. As a matter of fact, I was in my grocery store parking lot and we have a bowling alley next door, and they had a sign that said, playing tomorrow, 19th Soul Sherpa. And I'm like, oh my God, that's the fucking best title for a book ever. I have to write it. So immediately my mind was just racing with this story of this 19th Soul Sherpa, which, by the way, is going to happen sometime in 2018. But sometimes it is character names. So that's the way it happened with The Alchemist's Kiss, is I knew I wanted to write a steampunk novel, and I was like, okay, steampunk. And then I was like, I like the name Icarus Kane. That sounds cool as hell. So then I'm like, and he's got a best friend, and his name is Archimedes Merriweather. And I'm like, now what kind of mischief could these two get up to? You know? And I'm like, okay, so if that's his name, and I went back and forth with like the heroine name like 3 or 4 times because she's Southern. So I'm like, I gotta have a good, strong Southern name. Like, she's gotta be tough. So she's Cora May. So then I'm like, you know, and the story just took off from there because I already had a full, like, just from their names, these characters were completely fleshed out, you know. And because when you think of a man whose name is Icarus Kane, you immediately think he's a stuck-up prig. You know what I mean? Like, those are the words that you're like, oh my God, you flew too close to the sun, buddy. Like, and so that's exactly his character. Is he's very haughty, he's very proper, and he has all these layers. So I that's where that came from. And songs, so like Desolation, music videos are my jam. So I have a huge obsession with YouTube, and I can watch music videos literally on end for hours at a time. So like Ed Sheeran's Give Me Love music video was the inspiration for Desolation and the Stories of Mythical Madness. And we'll get into this later in the podcast, but I actually can't write without a theme song for each one of my stories. It's extremely important and it's part of the flow. So if I don't have it, I can't do it. But my big new thing that I'm super hooked on are called AMVs, anime music videos. So they take clips from animes and they put them together and they set them to music. And it can be anime I've never seen, like The Boy and the Beast, which now I'm obsessed and have to see. But it like goes perfectly with the song, you know? So it always inspires me. It like sets me on fire and I'm immediately like, I have to write about this theme of whatever the song's about, you know? So it could be Forged in Fire came from the song I Will Not Bow by Breaking Benjamin. Basically, I would rather set the world on fire than be on my knees in front of somebody else, you know? And so that's my main character. He was ready to sacrifice everything, willing to sacrifice everything for, you know, his vow to protect his planet. So that's kind of how it works for me. It could be a song. I try not to get too inspired by other people's books. Not that they don't inspire me, but sometimes you find yourself like osmosising their ideas a little bit. So I try to keep away from that and try not to read anything too close to the genre that I'm currently writing, because then I tend to suck up their style and sometimes their voice and the way they write. So I try not to do that, but I have been inspired by books before, movies and TV shows and that kind of thing. P, what about you?
Oh, sorry. Hi. Well, what I get my story ideas from people. I work in such an environment that I get weird ass people. Since I have anywhere on my blog, anywhere where I work, I can say this. Those people are batshit crazy. And so one guy that comes to get drinks, he looks like a troll. And I honestly was looking at him like, how the fuck can anyone like him? And I was like, ooh, troll story. So I'm working on a story where a troll lives in Joshua Tree National Park and he finds love. That's where I got him from, which is sad because he still comes to my window. I'm like, ha, 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 I got the perfect woman for you. Go live in the desert. I also get my story ideas I know this is going to sound so weird, just from my head. Like, I am one of those people that sit down, I'm like, I need to write a story. One day late at night, there was that's a good story. And like, just from a few words, a story takes place in my head, and I sit there talking to myself, and I flesh it out. So my brain is constantly making up stories, and I think it's because maybe I started so young that I already have an imagination. I used to tell myself stories to go to bed. So to me, making up a story is very easy. So, like, my favorite story as a young child to tell myself was that I was an alien coming to Earth and I had like this huge like suit on, I guess, and I would get to Earth and I was like the queen of the aliens or a princess, and I would come down and I would land and everybody would be standing around so scared to see what I look like.
I still tell myself that story. What are you talking about?
Story fleshed out, huh?
I still tell myself that story. What are you talking about?
Like, but that was my whole story. I had a spaceship, again, just like Jamestown. I knew what the spaceship looked like, how many rooms. I knew everything about this world. And I used to tell myself this story going to sleep every night almost. So I think my brain just kind of makes up things. And now that I'm writing them down, I have way too many ideas. So I have to just carry, like I say, these little books around because I'm like, oh God, shut up, brain. I need to write this one, not you. So my story ideas just pop in my head, or trolls that I work with. Okay, Ish.
Let's see. I think I get a majority of my stories just through reading, watching TV, but a lot of them I have to thank my husband for. Sometimes we just, on long car drives, we live roughly 30 miles from the main city where we have to do our grocery shopping and stuff, since we live in the middle of frickin' nowhere. So we have a lot of time to talk. It's about 45 minutes there, 45 minutes back. And sometimes, I'll be like, well, I got these characters in my head, and I'll be like, but they're doing this, but I don't know what to do. And he's like, well, how about? And I'm like, oh my gosh. He just, and my husband's quite funny. So that's where I get a lot of the humor in my stories. They're corny sometimes, the humor, but it's me and my husband. We really are just, yeah, we're crazy that way, I guess. But I get a lot of ideas by bouncing them off of, yes, I love my husband. That's right, heart. But I get a lot of my ideas through him by just talking it out. Like you guys said, watch TV, we're watching Walking Dead. If I wrote a zombie, how could I make it different? what are the important things you have to have versus what you can get away with being different. We talk about those things, and it creates stories. So, I mean, actually, I owe a lot of my story ideas to my husband. He pulls up random things. Hey, did you see this in the news today? And I'm, what? So, that's where they come from for me. Yes, I love my hubby.
Well, that's good because you're stuck with him. So that was all the questions I had for all of us to answer involving inspiration. And I know, Amy, you had said you were going to go into more of your theme song thing. Did you mean at a later podcast, or did you want to elaborate more on that during this podcast?
I thought we had discussed one of our questions would be what inspires us when we're stuck in a rut.
That's a good question.
Our stories are stuck. So for myself specifically, and this just happened to me, I realized that I was trying to write a story and I did not have a theme song. So part of my usual MO is that, I have the song and it pretty much, I listen to it on repeat and I kind of let it get me in the mood, and it gives me the vibe of the story. Like if it's real tough and hard and fast and I'm like, okay, or if it's real soft and sweet, depending on what the story is supposed to be about. So as you guys know, I'm searching YouTube frantically looking for a theme song for the story that I was trying to write. And then when I finally found it, it's a giant epiphany for me because it elicits all these emotions inside me that are absolutely necessary for me to be able to write it on paper. Yes, it elicits emotions inside me, okay? And it was not Kenny G, so we were good. But that's what I need, is I have to have an emotional stimulation. Usually music, sometimes music videos. I have a thing for music videos, but if I could produce and direct music videos, I think my life would be cool, but that's a whole different story. Anyway, so I found out that, it helped me get over this hump that I had found myself kind of stuck on, because I did not have the right, I wasn't in the right frame of mind, I guess, to write the story that I was trying to write. And the music really put me there. So that's how I get over, like, when I'm stuck in a rut or I can't move forward. So, Elle, what inspires you when you're stuck?
I'm not really sure. I call it inspiration. So if I'm stuck, if I sit down and I'm bored, or if I sit down and I'm like, I don't know what these characters are doing, I kind of try to take a step back and look at the overall, like how I want people to feel, what I wanted the characters to accomplish, and how I wanted them to grow. Because if your characters don't have growth throughout the story, what's the point of the story? Sure, they can save the planet, but if they don't learn that, I don't know, they have a fear of heights and how to get over it, what's the point? So, and it kind of goes back to my original, if I've got a hole somewhere, I just wait for the inspiration to come. That's kind of how I handle, like, writer's block. So I normally have a couple projects going. So something is in the writing phase, something I can edit, and something I can brainstorm. So honestly, if I'm working on something and I'm stuck, like the characters are just not behaving, I'll do something else and I'll wait for inspiration to strike. Because I've tried, like you, I tried to force a story when I wasn't feeling it, and the writing was flat, and the story was flat, and the story was boring. And as an author, I know if what I'm writing is boring, the reader's going to be bored too. So I just learned not to push it, and keeping several projects kind of on the burners, although not in the same stage of their production, really helps, because I can change gears and let something simmer and work on something else. So it's not necessarily getting inspired past a writer's block. It's just kind of understanding my process so that I end up with a better product. What about you, P? How do you deal with getting stuck, and what inspires you?
I stop writing. Let me see. When I get stuck on one story, I have like 20 open right now. So if one story is kicking me in the butt, I'm like, okay, screw you. Next one. All right, screw you. Next one. I inevitably circle back to the one I'm supposed to be writing. because I'm like, oh, that's a good idea. Oh, but that's a good idea for this one. So I think I just kind of take my brain into a different direction until rocks rumble out. Just because if I'm stuck, my writing becomes very, very stilted. If I try to, like, I don't see the big picture. I'm a pantser, whatever. But I can't plan. So if I try to force a story and it's not flowing, it comes out so horribly stilted that I go back and read it and I'm like, oh, this sounds horrible. So I have to move on to the next book and then just come back to it. That's just the way my brain works. It's part of, I guess, just part of me. Just move on. Come back to it later. I have one book I need to go back and write. No, I will at one point. But one example I can say is if my Captive Guardian, that book, it was annoying me because he wouldn't do what he was supposed to do. The main character, Michael. Come to find out, I was trying to force him into a relationship he shouldn't have been in, and the girl I was trying to force him with ended up with 2 mates because she needed 2 to handle her, and he needed a male. So sometimes it's not really writer's block. It's us trying to force ourselves onto our characters, and that's why I need to take a step back and think, okay, what's the personality? Fine, screw you. We'll go your direction and see how it goes. So that's how I kind of get over mine. Ish?
I don't think I get actual writer's block. I get lazy ass. I don't feel like it, so I'm not going to. I don't write on one story at one time, though. I write anywhere from 2 to 3 books at a time, which is, if you guys haven't noticed, when I release a book, there's usually 1 or 2 that follow pretty quick. It's because I've been writing them all at the same time. So that's just how I work. It's not that I don't have inspiration. Sometimes I do. I'm like Amy, sometimes music. If I hear the right song on the radio, just, coming from town or whatever, or just listening to radio while I'm cleaning the house, it'll hit me the right way, and I'll be like, oh my God, I need to write this scene. It just happens. But I don't, if I make days to just plan and sit there, well, I'm going to write today. Guess what happens? I play World of Warcraft because I didn't feel like it. So it's not that I have writer's block. It's just some days I just don't feel like it. And then, the other side jobs I do and just, regular life, sometimes I don't want a word. It's really that simple. So
okay.
Do we make up half our words? I'm sorry, real fast. Like, we don't want a people. Now we don't want a word.
We're authors. We're allowed to make up words.
Oh, okay.
It's our thing.
Yeah, it's our thing. We can make up words. I don't feel like wording today. I don't want to blurt today.
I hear a lot of people say they don't want a people, so it's not just us.
But Ish just started a new movement of I don't want a word today.
Well, you'll be able to hear that in your vernacular very shortly, because you'll probably hear me saying, I don't want a word today. Might not necessarily follow my own advice, but I will probably say I don't want a word, and then I'll write anyway. So then I think that concludes everything that we are inspired by, unless anyone wants to cut in with anything additional. I think we've been yakking for about 45 minutes. I don't know. But thank you for joining us. If you like the podcast, please like, comment, and share. If you listen on iTunes, please, please, please leave a review. That helps people find us. This has been episode number 48. Have a good night.